All right, excellent. So welcome everybody. My name is Brad Waldschmidt. I'm an engineer working with the Nashville Department of Transportation on their neighborhood street traffic calming program. So we really appreciate you all coming, joining us this evening to talk about Annex Avenue and the traffic calming design that's been prepared for Annex Avenue. I'm joined by my colleague Ellie. Ellie, if you could introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ellie Finn. I work with Brad at Kimley Horn, and I've been helping him out with these traffic calming meetings. So I'll be here checking the chat if anybody has questions there, looking for raised hands and things like that. Thanks.
Excellent. Thanks, Ellie. So what we'd like to do with everyone tonight is spend about 12 to 15 minutes walking through a presentation and the proposed traffic calming design we prepared along Annex Avenue. Again, it'll probably take about 12 or 15 minutes. We'll talk through what those next steps are going to be as well, because there'll be a voting opportunity for everybody that lives along Annex Avenue. We want to get through all of that. And then at the end, we'll have plenty of time for comments or questions. And what we're going to do then at the end is ask for you to do one of two things. Either at the end, if you could come off of mute and ask some questions once we're finished with our presentation. The other option is at the end, or really anytime during the presentation, there should be a bottom right button where you can click and open a chat window, and feel free to chat a question at any point. We may not address it and get to it till after the presentation still, but if you want to go ahead and just type it in the chat, Ellie and I'll be monitoring that as well. So that's what we'd like to do. Before we get started on our presentation, council member, I know you're joining. Would you like to have any opening remarks?
No, just thank you for implementing this program, traffic calming. I know it's very popular, and appreciate you taking the time to share it with the community and provide the community the opportunity to share their input as well. So thank you, and look forward to hearing from you.
Okay. Well, wonderful. We'll go ahead and get started. And Councilmember, while I have you, I want to make sure, are you able to see the Annex Avenue title slide?
We can see.
All right, then the tech is working. So let's get going. So we like to make sure we cover traffic calming. The neighborhood street traffic calming program focuses on residential streets, and we're looking to reduce the vehicle speeds by looking at physical solutions that can be implemented within the right-of-way to encourage those lower speeds over the entire length of that street. We like to focus on 3 E's of traffic calming. The first E is education, and this meeting is a very good example of that education. We as the engineers can educate you all on some traffic calming solutions that could help reduce vehicle speeds, but you all are the experts of your street that you live on. You drive in the street much more than we do. So together, we all make a very good team that can really try to make sure we're focusing on the traffic calming solutions that could happen along Annex Avenue. The second E is enforcement. Enforcing the posted speed limits is absolutely a part of traffic calming. So that means police officers, enforcing the speed limits. But that is one thing that the Nashville Department of Transportation does not have jurisdiction over. So while that's important, NDOT does not really have much jurisdiction over the enforcement as much, but we do have some say on this third E, which is that engineering. What are some engineering solutions that can be done to these neighborhood streets to try to encourage lower speeds? So that's what we're here to talk about. Now, safety and the vision of 0 deaths on our streets one day. This is a big reason why the traffic calming program is so important to Nashville and NDOT. If an awful crash happens where a vehicle strikes a pedestrian while they're walking or running or whatnot, if that car is driving 25 miles an hour, that pedestrian has an 89% chance of surviving that crash. Now, if you look to the far right of the same graphic, if that same car is going 45 miles an hour and an awful crash happens where it hits a pedestrian, that pedestrian has a 35% chance of survival. Now, we don't want any crashes like this to happen, but we want to really focus on reducing those vehicle speeds. So if a really unfortunate crash does happen, we want that pedestrian to have a higher chance of surviving it. And that's why we're focusing on trying to lower these speeds on these residential streets with the traffic calming program. But very important slide here for why we do this. So Annex Avenue was one of 26 streets that were chosen back in February. There was an application. NDOT reviewed over 460 streets that had been applied for. And Annex Avenue was one of 26 that were chosen back in February. I cannot remember when we had our first meeting. It was either April or May, but we were meeting with 26 streets all at once and then preparing designs for all of those streets. And now here we are meeting with you all for the second meeting with Annex Avenue to present that design. But that's sort of how Annex Avenue has come to be selected for traffic calming. We're going to talk a lot about traffic calming, but there may be some questions or some thoughts that are not traffic calming. And that's where we like to make sure that everybody is familiar with Hub Nashville. You can either dial 311 or you can go to hub.Nashville.gov. And there may be other things that you feel like someone at Nashville needs to know about. It could be you think there need to be more stop signs, or maybe there's a traffic signal that doesn't look like it's doing something it should be, or a clogged storm drain. Really just anything you feel like someone at Nashville needs to know about. Hub Nashville is your center to get it routed to the right place. So we just like to make sure everyone's familiar with this tool. But for traffic calming, Ellie and I, we are your team. We're here to talk with you, but we always like to make sure everybody knows about everything else, the Hub Nashville tool that you can use. So you all live on Annex, you know your street, but we always like to use maps. So this is a map of Annex Avenue, of essentially almost the entirety of Annex Avenue from the south there, right from that intersection of Annex, Cabot, and Thunderbird, and then goes all the way up to Robertson. So that's the extent of Annex Avenue. One note, this does not really play into the future of Annex Avenue and traffic calming, but on the south there you can see there's a green line on Cabot Drive. It's not labeled very well. Cabot Drive is currently in the voting process. It just started a few weeks ago for traffic calming along Cabot Drive. And then kind of on the top of the page, you see another green line. That's James Avenue. I believe the James Avenue ballots were sent out either late last week or perhaps early this week. So that's really just more for context. It doesn't have any say on Annex Avenue, whether traffic calming is going to happen or not. We'll get to that voting part in a minute. But just so everybody knows, Cabot to your south and James to your north are also considering some traffic calming on their streets. So Annex Avenue is here what we're here to talk about, of course. So we looked at a few different traffic calming measures, and what we've recommended for Annex Avenue is one of our more common and effective traffic calming solutions. And there's something called speed cushions. Sometimes you might hear them referred to as humps or tables. We call them speed cushions. They're these black rubberized modular devices. You can sort of see 4 different photos for 4 different types of examples of what they look like. Many streets in Nashville are receiving these through the traffic calming program. You'll see that there's gaps in the middle. Something called a speed table is if that black rubberized device extended the entire width of the street without any gaps. That'd be something what we call a speed table. These speed cushions intentionally have those gaps, and those gaps are because emergency vehicles such as fire trucks and ambulances, their front tires can actually straddle the speed cushion. So if they need to get somewhere to attend to an urgent situation, their front wheels can do a little better job of not being impacted as much by the traffic calming speed cushion. Their back tires, they usually have extra tires back there because of all the weight, so they will ramp up on the cushion a little bit, but usually it's on the left and right side, not quite as much of a bump is our understanding. But these speed cushions are what we've proposed along Annex Avenue. And just we like to show this graph because Nashville, we have done some before and after studies. So as you can see, whether we're looking at average speed or something us traffic engineers look at called the 85th percentile speed, we see a decrease in the vehicle speed, which if you think back to that graph, that Vision Zero graph, this is what we're trying to do. And so, and NDOT is collecting even more studies, I believe, this year and on to next year just to prove that point even more. But we're seeing these speed cushions are effective. So that's what we're anticipating a similar result could be for Annex Avenue. Now, this is a very zoomed out image. 2 things I want to bring up to y'all's attention. The first is the north arrow is pointing to the right. We just had to rotate it this way to fit. So if you're used to looking at Annex Avenue on a map, you kind of got to rotate it 90 degrees. Just want to make sure everyone doesn't get thrown off by that. Just this is the best way we could do to fit it on a page. The other thing is this is very zoomed out, but we're going to zoom in to each one of those dashed rectangles to kind of get a more closer look at the proposed design. But one quick thing to note, everywhere you see one of those yellow trapezoids with a C in it, that's a proposed location of those speed cushions that we're proposing along Annex Avenue. There's quite a few on here, but Annex Avenue is also a very long street when you start at Thunderbird Cabot intersection, go all the way up to Robertson. I'm gonna do a real quick right here. I believe there are 12 total locations along Annex Avenue that's being designed. One thing we do take into account, we cannot design speed cushions on very, very steep hills. We were out in the field several months ago taking measurements, so we knew where we could put cushions or what hills were too steep. Another thing is we also take note of where the all-way stops are. You know, we don't necessarily need the speed cushions to be 10 feet from an all-way stop, so we also take that into consideration with our design. But yeah, everywhere that you see a C with a trapezoid, that's a proposed location of a speed cushion. And so what we'd like to do now is start at Thunderbird Cabot. We're going to kind of work our way left to right on this image, but I think if we rotate it, it's going to be south to north. So what we want to do is we're going to start over on sheet 2 on the left. We're going to zoom in and work our way to the right up toward Robertson. So we're zoomed in a little closer here. Cabot Thunderbird's just off the page to the bottom. So what we want to do is walk through each proposed location of speed cushions, all 12, make sure people can get a feel for where these are being proposed. So I'm going to start at the bottom there. That first set of speed cushions is proposed near the 380 Annex address. And then if we continue up the page, the next cushion is proposed near 394 Annex. And then kind of on the upper right corner before we're going to go to the next sheet, that third cushion location is proposed near the 406 Annex. And when we're saying that they're proposed in front of these, we didn't pick these people's properties on purpose. We just looked at the spacing of where are the most appropriate locations we thought to reduce speeds. And it just so happens these are the properties they lined up in front of. Another note is when we do say something like, hey, a proposed speed cushion in front of or near 394, we also make sure that when we're proposing speed cushions, they're not right in front of someone's driveway. They're not in the middle of an intersection. We usually try to make sure the cushions are designed a certain number of feet away from driveways so that, you know, turning in and out of your driveway, maybe it won't be impacted as much. So just want to kind of mention that. But these are the first three, kind of the southern three. Let's continue on to the next sheet as we work our way kind of north after this curve here. So that next location, sort of in the upper left portion, that's located near 422 Annex Avenue. And as we continue on down Annex Avenue, which again, down on this sheet is kind of almost kind of going northeast on a map. The next location is proposed near 446 Annex Avenue. All right. So then there's another location kind of on the left side. We've moved to the next sheet. There's a speed cushion location proposed at 544 Annex. And as we go through the river, I'm not sure if it's River Rouge or River Rouge. I'm hoping somebody can correct me. But as we go through that intersection, the next two cushion locations, there's one near the intersection of 468 Annex, and then the intersection of 483. And real quick, I just noticed something. Well, the speed cushions on the very left of this screen are in the correct location, but I noticed that note says it's in front of 544 Annex. That numbering doesn't seem to line up right. So I may have misspoken, but you can see on the other side of the street, it's 455 Annex. So just know that if that 544 label is incorrect, we can get that corrected after the meeting, but the location of it is in the correct spot. We just may have a labeling issue. Just want to call that out. So, so this sheet shows cushions in front of 455, 468, and then 483. That 483 is near that Charlotte Park Elementary School. So now we're going to go on to the next sheet. There's two more sheets, I believe. The next speed cushion location is right south of Henry Ford Drive near the 504 Annex address. Then the next one right before Edsel is near the 516 Annex. And then I think this is going to be the last sheet going north. Two more cushion locations before that Robertson Annex intersection. The location near the 535 Annex address, and then the location near the 557 Annex. And again, we just put those addresses on there just so everyone can kind of understand where they're located. But also when a contractor, if there's a successful vote, when a contractor goes out, they'll know where to install them. So we definitely know there may be some questions or about this design. We have about, I think, 4 or 5 more slides. We can definitely come back to this during the Q&A. But that's sort of a walkthrough of the speed cushion design that we've proposed. These are images that our contractor uses when installing them. And what it shows is when a road is a little wider, we'll usually propose 3 cushions at each location. So there's not a lot of extra pavement that cars that might want to try to get around these can. But when a road is narrower, we might just do 2. And so these are just a bunch of different, if the speed cushions get installed and then you kind of flew up in the air and looked straight down, this is sort of what they look like. So there's more for the contractor, but this sort of helps people hopefully understand what the different cushions might look like along Annex Avenue. And I believe, yeah, there's one more here as well. But that's sort of what the design looks like. We want to talk about where we're at in the process. We kind of talked through, Annex Avenue was applied for, it got selected, we met, we prepared the design. Here we are at meeting 2. The next step is a very exciting step, the online ballot. I may be wrong, but I feel like this is one of the unique programs in Metro Nashville where the residents along the street ultimately get to choose if they want this project or not. And so the next step is going to be a ballot. There will be a third mailer. There was one for the first meeting. Hopefully everybody got mailers for the second meeting, the property owners, that is. There will be a third round of mailers. There'll be a mailer ballot. And it'll look something like that upper left corner of this sheet. And when you go to that QR code or go to the web page, it'll look like that bottom left image. And every address will have a unique ID code. So when you're putting in your name, your address, your information, your yes vote or your no vote, you can also put that unique ID code in so we can kind of make sure we're tracking along and checking that. After this meeting, if we all generally are good with the design, this is the next step. We, NDOT, will mail out the mailer ballots, and then there'll be a voting window open for 6 weeks. And everyone who's a property owner, a residential property owner along Annex Avenue, should receive a mailer ballot and will have a chance to vote. Each residential property owner will get 1 vote. And at the end of 6 weeks, we will count up all the votes. And if 2/3 of the people that vote yes, then this traffic calming project will happen. But if that 2/3 threshold is not met, of all the people that vote, if the 2/3 is not met, then this project will not get built. We at NDOT will coordinate again with the applicants, with the council member. We'll look into some alternative design that probably will not involve speed cushions. But this is sort of the opportunity where if people like this and want this, you get to vote either way. We at NDOT just want to provide an engineering design we're comfortable with, but it's ultimately going to come back to you all to decide. This is a very zoomed out. We may even have a few different, see 1 of 3 at the bottom. Annex is very long. So you can see churches and schools each get 1 vote. Each residential property owner gets 1 vote. And it's whether your front yard, side yard, backyard, if any of that touches Annex Avenue, you should be eligible to vote. We don't let vacant properties vote, and businesses also do not get a vote. For apartment complexes, it's usually 1 big property, so that's 1 vote. Even if many people live on it, it's 1 property, so it's 1 vote for something like, say, an apartment complex. Here's a second of those 3 just to kind of show generally those yellow highlighted parcels are what will be in play, and then going all the way up there. So that's what the next steps will be. We'll prepare those mailer ballots, and then you'll see you'll have 6 weeks of online voting. And if it's a successful vote, what we're typically seeing right now is up to 4 months to order these materials and get them in, then another 4 months on top of that for the install and the construction. So that's, if there's a successful vote, that's 8 months. We at NDOT are really trying to look at ways to expedite that with the materials, the contractors. So just know that's a long time. We're looking into things we can do to speed it up. But that's honestly what we've been seeing with us. And part of this is because so many streets are having yes votes, and the contractors that install these things have so much work. So we're seeing a lot of safer streets, but it's also meaning that there's a lot of work to get done. So that's the normal time frame we're seeing. We're hoping it can decrease it, but this is a good idea of kind of what we've been seeing. So that concludes our presentation, but we want to open it up to questions and comments. And Ellie, I'm going to ask my colleague Ellie if you could come off of mute, and if you could, if there's been any questions in the chat, if you'd be willing to read them aloud.
Doesn't look like there have been any questions, but Chris is helping you out with that pronunciation. I think it's Rouge.
Rude. Okay.
Yes.
Excellent.
And then Zach was saying that he thinks the 544 address was correct. It's listed as Starliner. I think it was just the property across the street from that 455 property.
Okay. Okay. Well, yeah. So what we need to do though, and this is really a minor edit. I think after this meeting, if it's supposed to be 544 Starliner Drive, we'll just change that label to make sure we're calling the right address, and we'll get that updated before we post it on the web page, before we go to ballot. Just for everybody to know, when the mailer ballots come, it directs you. I'm going to go back real quick. The mailer ballot takes you, if you go to that web page or use that QR code, it takes you to that lower left corner, to where you can actually vote. What you can't see as well is there is a link up at the top of that voting web page that takes you to this design. This design's not up on the web page yet, but it will be before the ballots go out. So then if you want to review the design again, you want to check to see if we actually updated 544 Starliner, or there may be someone who didn't join the meeting, but they want to make sure they can get educated on what they're voting for. That design will be up there as well. So I just wanted to touch on that as well.
Perfect. Okay, we do have some questions now. What is the longevity of the cushions? Because it seems like a lot of big construction trucks are using Annex.
Gotcha.
So I guess the longevity, sorry, of the cushions versus other solutions for traffic calming.
Gotcha. And I'll be honest, when I heard longevity, I was going to go and say they're 10.5 feet long. But now I'm wondering if the question might be like, how many years will they last? So I'm going to answer both. So they're wear and tear. Okay, thank you, Chris. So as far as number of years, I do not know off the top of my head how many years they're supposed to last. What I can tell you is that if there's a successful vote, and if and that means that the speed cushions get installed, two things will happen. The first is once they get installed, the vendor that NDOT uses for these speed cushions, I believe it's a vendor called TrafficLogix, there's a warranty with their materials. And so if any of these ever degrade or get damaged in a way they shouldn't, that's one of the tools of Hub Nashville. You can let them know, hey, these speed cushions are getting broken, and then NDOT can hopefully use that warranty if something needs to get repaired. But the other thing is if they do start getting damaged or repaired, either way, your best bet, would be to go to Hub Nashville so that NDOT can either repair it or replace it. So if these speed cushions start getting damaged, just like anything after Hub Nashville, if something's damaged, NDOT needs to know about it so they can attend to it. That would be the same for these speed cushions. So I don't have a number of years, but just know that it would generally be something that NDOT would be maintaining, just like everything else that NDOT maintains throughout the metropolitan area.
All right, looks like we're also wondering when the mailers go out.
Yeah, so we always like to make sure we're hearing feedback on our design. Usually the design that we present at the second meeting, it proceeds and no changes made. Every once in a while, through some conversation or some comments, we kind of mutually determine maybe a slight change needs to be made. I already know one text edit that we need to make, but I would say that if we're all good with the design this evening, likely what would happen is next week, next Friday at the latest, next Friday, that's November 3rd, probably the mailer ballots would go in the mail Friday, November 3rd, which means that we would expect them to start being received at people's mailboxes, the property owners' mailboxes, that November 6th through 10th week. But November 3rd, next Friday, would kind of start that 6-week voting clock. That's probably how quickly the voting would start. So in other words, we're ready, but we always like to make sure we're talking and presenting the design. We feel pretty good about it, but it's always good to, like we said, you all are the experts of the street, we're the experts of the traffic calming. Let's make sure we're all talking before we proceed to the vote.
Good to know. Okay, so speaking of the voting, if we get a no from the residents, in our experience, have alternative plans been pursued, such as signage or a modified number of cushions,
Yes. So,
etc.?
so if after the 6-week voting period, if of all the people that actually cast a vote, if that 2/3 yes is not met, there will not be any speed cushions on Annex. So it's either this design for speed cushions on Annex or no speed cushions. That's what the no would probably mean. Typically, what we often look to is something called radar feedback signs. They are usually a speed limit sign that also has a radar built in, and then there's a little electronic readout. Nashville's got a few of them in various streets, and that electronic readout actually reports what your speed is, and if that speed is over the posted speed limit. Sometimes it flashes at you. I think Nashville orders the ones where it turns from yellow to red, kind of letting you know red, hey, you're doing something you shouldn't do. This is the speed you're going. So a no vote would probably cause us to coordinate with the applicant and the council member and pursue something like a radar feedback sign. But NDOT, we would interpret a overall no vote as no, we don't want vertical traffic calming speed cushions on Annex Avenue. That's how we would interpret it. Whereas a yes vote would be, yes, we do want vertical traffic calming on Annex.
Okay, so does that also apply to the design of the cushions? Is that something they're voting on today, or could maybe be changed in the future, I guess?
Yeah, so I'm gonna kind of just zoom out on this kind of zoomed out sheet. So we our intent is that you're voting on this design as we're presenting it to you. So 12, again, I'm counting really quickly just to make sure I'm not misleading. I believe there's 12. I counted before the meeting. And so 12 speed cushions along Annex Avenue between Thunderbird Cabot and the Robertson intersection at the locations that we walked through that are on the design. That's pretty much what the vote is. We typically don't entertain design edits during this call. I mean, if there's anything we've missed, we want to hear about it now. But after the vote, usually this is the design. If it's a yes vote, this is the design that will get implemented. We typically don't add cushions or remove cushions because then we're changing something that everyone voted on. And so that we want to make sure we kind of stay the course with a design we feel good about. I hope that answers the question, but this is sort of the design we're proposing. Open for comments if there are any, but once this hits the vote, the thought is that a yes means that this is good, what's going to get built if there's a yes vote.
Okay, I think it looks like there's one more question for now. For residents who receive a ballot for voting, will there be information included that describes how they're designed to work with emergency vehicles or any other data like was shown today?
Gotcha. So I'm trying to think real quick. I think I'm going to go back to what the ballot. So the mailer will not address that. It will take you to the voting webpage, which is the bottom left. The voting webpage will not do that. There is a link to the design. You can review the design. I think the best way to describe that or to address that is one of the reasons we record these meetings, like this meeting right here we're recording, is because NDOT typically posts these onto their YouTube channel. And so I would say within 2 or 3 business days, this meeting right here will be posted on NDOT's public-facing YouTube page. And so the presentation and the dialogue, that is something that will be available to people if they'd like to, review that as well before voting. That's probably the best answer I have for it. So it's not the most direct, but this recording will be available. I hope that addresses it.
Okay, I think back to the design question, it might have been about the configuration and if we're voting on the configurations tonight or if those might change.
Gotcha. So let me be clear
Health
on,
versus
yeah.
style and space,
So
sorry.
yeah, no, that's great. So I'll be clear. We're not voting on anything tonight. The vote will occur once the mailer ballots get sent out. Tonight, we do want to hear from you though, and get comments and feedback. And if there's some, if we kind of have some discussions here and determine maybe something needs to change, now's the time to kind of talk through that. So no voting tonight per se, but we do want to hear
Sorry.
feedback. So yeah.
I think I was adding the tonight. It's just the vote in general.
Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah, everything that we've presented is going to be what's up for the vote. The number of cushions along Annex, the locations of each cushion, as well as the configuration of each cushion along Annex, kind of voting for it all. So essentially, you'd be voting for speed cushions that are 6 foot wide, 10.5 feet long. Some of them have 2 at each location. Some of them have 3, depending on how wide the pavement is. I'm going to cycle back through slides. A total of 12 as shown here. Kind of everything that essentially, I'm going to count real quick. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. These 8 pages will be that design that's available on the webpage. So when people go to vote, they can click on it. These 8 pages will be the design that they can reference to when they're voting. But yeah, everything that's been presented is sort of what the yes or no vote is. I don't believe we really offer a yes if, dot. It's just really a yes or no. But this is the meeting where, if there's some feedback we need to consider, we want to hear it now.
All right. Have we seen any data where speed cushions have increased traffic on side streets for people trying to get away from the speed cushions?
Right. That's a good question. If I understand the premise of the question, I'm guessing the thought is that if Annex Avenue gets these speed cushions and vehicles are driving on it, and when they get the speed cushions on Annex, if there's a successful vote, maybe some vehicles won't want to drive on Annex anymore, and maybe they'll want to drive on some other street. I'm guessing that's the premise of it. And the answer is that may happen. There's no way to actually prove or disprove that that'll happen. We'll say on some streets, it may happen. On some other streets, it may not be as likely to happen. The best response that we can really offer is that if there is a volume shift and if there's a speeding shift, if there's speeding that happens on Annex, these speed cushions take care of that. But some other street in this neighborhood, we start seeing speeding. That application window opens twice a year. Anybody in Nashville can apply for their street to be considered for traffic calming. And then we collect speed data and other data twice a year and see if that street should get put into the program. So if there is some other street that becomes in fact, either way, you can apply even if you don't want to wait to see what happens on Annex. That's also an option. So I would say it's possible, but it's really hard to prove or disprove that it'll happen. It might, but it also might not.
All right, it looks like we have some concern about the spaced cushions and those configurations because of dirt bike and motorcycle traffic that goes down Annex will not be slowed down by those in particular.
Yeah, I'm gonna go actually no, I think one of these I'm gonna go to the photo example. So I would say that's an accurate observation. I would say a lot of times at NDOT we kind of compare, hey, speed cushions or speed tables. And again, speed tables they look very similar to the cushions. They go across the entire width of the road without those gaps in the middle and without as large of a gap on the side. So what we determined is that with a speed table, every vehicle is going to have to go over it, including vehicles like motorcycles or dirt bikes. So if there's any speeding motorcycles, they'll have to go over the speed table. Also, emergency vehicles will also have to go over the speed table, which means if they're trying to get somewhere for some sort of urgent situation, they're also going to be slowed, just like a motorcycle or a passenger vehicle would. So compared to the speed cushions now, most cars, like the car I drive, at best I can put one wheel path over the speed cushion and the others stay on the road, but I can't straddle it. I can't go around it. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to limit any vehicle that wants to try to go too fast. We don't want to force them to have to go over these speed cushions. Now, leaving these gaps does mean, like a motorcycle or a dirt bike, if they want to speed, I sure hope they don't. But if they still want to, it is possible that they could go around the sides, or they could like shoot in between. That's true. It could be a bicycle also, but obviously a bicycle won't pick up nearly the same speed as a motorcycle. But that's possible. But it also means an emergency vehicle may be able to get to where they need to go just a little bit quicker compared to a speed table. And so that's sort of the trade-off that we often talk through is one option means we're probably going to calm the motorcycles a little better, but emergency vehicles will be impacted with response times a little more. Whereas these speed cushions, yeah, the motorcycles unfortunately might still be able to shoot the gap, but emergency vehicles might have a little quicker response time compared to speed tables. And usually we favor that second option, the speed cushions, because we'd rather make sure if emergency vehicles need to get somewhere that they can. But that's truly the advantage and disadvantage to both. But we often want to sway toward the speed cushion. But that's the thought process and the reasoning. We do think about it. It's real. We know that there's an advantage and disadvantage to both. We just feel like the speed cushions are just a little more advantageous. So that's why we've incorporated it in the design.
All right, it doesn't seem, I don't see any new questions. If I'm missing anything, someone feel free to let me know.
Gotcha. No, appreciate that, Ellie. Yeah, if anybody else has questions, feel free to chat, or if you'd like to come off of mute, that works as well. I really appreciate this discussion so far.
Hey, Brad, I'll come off mute just because I can't type it fast enough. But are there different like heights to these things, or different like angles that they take? Or are they all the same, like 3 inches at their highest point, and just kind of the taper from that?
Yeah, the height is the same. So I'm going to make a bold statement here. Any speed cushion in Nashville is going to have the same maximum height. They're all going to have the same angle taper for the ramps. They're all going to be a width of 6 feet. What could vary is the length, and hopefully some of these photos show that there's varying lengths. That bottom left photo, you can kind of see the left and the right are kind of the angles or the ramps, and then that middle piece is kind of like a flat piece. So we do propose different lengths. I think for Annex Avenue, we've recommended 10.5 feet length just for the speed that we're trying to target. But yeah, all the speed cushions by this vendor are 3-inch maximum height with the same angle. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head what those angles are, but they are consistent.
Cool. Thanks. This has been really great. I appreciate
Absolutely.
it.
And I'll add, that's one that your question, I'll just kind of add more than you actually asked about, but I like to, part of that education, right? There are speed humps that some cities implement. You may have driven over them in your lives for the people on the call. Sometimes they just make them with pavement. They just use asphalt and they pave speed humps. But sometimes you can go over 4 speed humps that are paved with asphalt on the same street, and they all are a little different because it's asphalt. It's all going to be different. One of the reasons NDOT really likes these products is they're manufactured. They're very, very consistent. So each speed cushion along Annex, like if there's a successful vote, would be the exact same feel. Unlike if an asphalt. That's just wanted to add a little more than what you asked about, but that's one of the reasons why Nashville likes using this vendor prefab instead of an asphalt solution, which could get pretty close, but all of them might feel a little different. So
I guess that goes back to my like longevity question. These probably last longer than asphalt under heavy weight. Asphalt might kind of cave over time, I think.
yeah, that's a good question. I honestly do not know the answer. But the good news is that, yeah, if there's a successful vote and these get installed, they're still Nashville NDOT property. Just like a sign knocked down or anything that's been damaged or knocked down, and Nashville city needs to know about it so they can address it. These speed cushions are going to fall under that same category. So yeah, that if there's any damage or anything, hopefully not. But if there is, you all know what to do after the project with the Hub Nashville resource.
It's awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome. Gotcha. I think I may have seen another note, but I wasn't able to catch it before it removed off my screen. Ellie, would you be willing to read that question, I think, about sidewalks?
Sure, yeah. Annex has the advantage of a sidewalk, though many used by people or kids use it. Are there any recommendations around crosswalks, as many cars also pass through stop signs?
Yeah, there's a few things there. So the first thing is, no, this traffic calming design does not recommend or propose any new crosswalks. Um, regarding the possibility of additional crosswalks being considered, that is not something that the traffic calming program will do, but it is something that NDOT or the sidewalk team at NDOT, could possibly consider. That would probably be another thing where you could also make a Hub Nashville request and and ask for consideration for additional crosswalks at specific locations along Annex. So I guess maybe the crosswalks could happen, but definitely will not happen as part of the traffic calming program. Now, I think I heard another reference in the comment about stop signs. It's really unfortunate that some motorists don't obey stop signs. Our traffic calming design does get designed around the fact that we assume cars are going to stop at always stops and stop signs. We know that's not always what happens. I know when I drive, I observe people don't always do that, but that is what we've designed it around. So I think for people running stop signs, that might fall into that second E category of enforcement. I think what the traffic calming can do, if it's a successful vote, that engineering can really help slow cars down. But if cars are running stop signs, that may have to be that kind of that enforcement. That'd probably be my best bet, which isn't an immediate solution, but that's probably the best way to answer that stop sign question.
All right, so if this vote does come to a yes and these are installed, do we know if there will be a follow-up study in the coming years to understand if they're working or not?
Yeah, the answer is a maybe, and I say that because I would say that NDOT would absolutely love to do a before and after study. We definitely have the before data because the before data is what helped get Annex selected. So I would say NDOT would like to perform an after study, but I also know they look at their budget to make sure they understand how many after studies, can they afford to do, especially with the large amount of traffic calming that's getting installed on all these streets. So I feel pretty comfortable saying that NDOT is going to do more before and after studies as more of these speed cushions are being installed throughout Nashville. I'm not so sure that we can commit to whether Annex Avenue will be one of those or not. I think it would be great, but again, that's kind of for NDOT to kind of budget, but they are wanting to do more studies in general. Not sure if Annex will be one or not. I can't really commit to that. But what we do know is we do feel like this will help reduce vehicle speeds along Annex and along other speed cushion streets that we've seen. We do feel like they'll be effective. This has been great. Again, what the next steps will be is we'll fix that one right there. We're gonna fix that address, make sure we get that updated so we have the right thing on there. And once we revise that design, we'll plan on getting those mailer ballots out again probably by next Friday, November 3rd. That'll start that 6-week voting period. I think what typically happens is at the end of that 6-week voting period, the NDOT lets the applicants and the council member know what the result of the vote is. That's usually, I believe, how NDOT communicates that. And then we would go from there, whether it was a yes or a no vote. But yeah, this has been great discussion. What other questions does the group have?
All right, if there is a photo of the speed cushions on the mailer for people who get the mailer and don't know what they look like, or is there a photo? Sorry.
Yes. So the answer is no, there's not a photo of the speed cushion. I've gone back to the slide here where that upper left corner is a very accurate image of what that mailer ballot will look like. We're also open to feedback on our mailers, for being honest. We try to keep them at a mailer size, like a postcard size, but squeeze in all the information to let people know what's going on. So I really like the idea of a photo with a speed cushion, but that may not fit on there. We could also put it on the ballot form, but sometimes a traffic calming design for a certain street may not have speed cushions as part of the design. And I think the ballot forms sort of like a generic form regardless of street. So it would be, we wouldn't want to necessarily have a foot of a speed cushion up there if that a certain street's design didn't even have speed cushions. I think the best route is that when people are at the ballot, if they do go to that design, again, there's another link, it's kind of hard to read, they'll be able to access this design. And this design, it does have, real quick, I'm going to go through. It does have these photos. For instance, this sheet has a photo of the upper left corner of what a typical speed cushion looks like, an upper right corner here. That's really the best way we try to communicate both the design, but also like a photographic example of what they look like. I do like your idea of speed cushions on the mailer. I think then, okay, we'll talk about that internally. I'm not sure we'll be able to incorporate it because I'm visualizing what it would do, and then we've already, just so the group knows, we've also gotten feedback. So it would be great if this text was larger on the mailer. So trying to fit a photo and make the text larger. We're going to take all this feedback and see what we can do, but not sure if we'll be able to squeeze the photo on there. But I do like that idea, and we're going to talk about that internally. So thank you for suggesting that.
Another comment, I think the concern about emergency vehicles will be a barrier for folks to vote yes. For future ballots, it may be helpful to include the information about how their design reduces the impact.
Gotcha. Yeah, and again, that's where we try to have these meetings. You know, we talk about it in the first meeting, we talk about it here in the second meeting, and then this meeting will be posted on YouTube to sort of educate people. I think it's also possible that this presentation could be made available as well. We can talk with NDOT about the possibility of that. So yeah, I think the people that are really invested, hopefully they're on this call or attending the meeting. Yeah, we struggle with how much information to provide. We want to provide all the information we can, but there is such thing as information overload, and we want the design to really clearly show it's being proposed. So we'll think about your suggestion for, I guess, the design, talking more about the emergency vehicles. But the hope is that someone who really wants to know what they're voting on will look through this presentation, this video, if they really want to be educated. That's our hope anyway. So. Great. Are there any additional questions or thoughts? Council member, you want to close us out? Call on you again.
Just thank you again for presenting this community and you know, answering everybody's questions and addressing their comments, and look forward to the ballots going out and seeing how people vote.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you everybody for participating and for all the great dialogue and questions. We have one edit to make for sure on that address. We just need to fix the street name on that label. The design is going to be pretty much the same what we presented. But we also appreciate the feedback, like trying to make sure that reviewers understand the emergency vehicle speed cushion design, as well as maybe the photo. Not sure if it will get all incorporated, but these are things we want to talk about internally on our side to see if there are things we can do. So really appreciate that feedback as well, everyone. Excellent. All right. Well, thank you again. Thank you. Please have a good rest of your evening.
So really appreciate it.